Let our folks over on YouTube catch up with us. And hey, good afternoon, midday, morning to you, wherever in the world you are. Welcome, I am your happy, hairy, hirsute host, and handsome to boot, Bill Sylvie. Good to see you, everybody. And overcoming a minefield of technical problems and all sorts of issues is today's author, game worker, honor guy, and Greyhawk raconteur, Allan Grohe. Say hello, Allan.
Hola, everybody.
So, I finally got you here. I dragged you kicking and screaming onto my streaming, which is good.
A little planning.
Yeah, I was worried we wouldn't be able to get you here till almost the end of summer, and I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being able to pop in and pop on. Make sure my Discord window's up there. So, for those of you who may not know Allan by name, Allan has his sticky fingerprints all over a number of products, and one that actually surprised me because I was this many years old when I found this out. Allan's name is in one of the coolest non-Dungeons & Dragons role-playing game products you can own, which I should probably have over here at the table to show you guys, but you are actually given credit in Delta Green, the sort of...
Yeah.
I hesitate to use this just because it's not fair because it was started design-wise before X-Files, but X-Files-y, for lack of a better term, a supplement for Call of Cthulhu set in the modern era. How did that come about? What is your connection? Who did you know, and when did you know it?
So, let's see. I started freelance writing when I was in college. I wrote my first article for White Wolf magazine number 11, back when they were a magazine, in 1988. And it was about shadow magics. But I didn't really... And I corresponded with the Wyatt brothers at White Wolf here and there and pitched several other pieces to them, but nothing really stuck at the time after that one. But when I came out to Kansas in '91 for grad school, the KU Kansas University gaming club was the biggest RPGA club in the country.
Really?
And they had a local convention that they decided to start doing a couple of years after I came out, called CoolCon, which was the KU Lawrence convention.
Okay.
And at the time, John Tynes and Jeff Barber in Missouri, they hadn't moved out to Seattle yet. And so they came to the convention. And so I had played a couple games with them, a couple years there, and started doing freelance writing for the Unspeakable Oath. So that was... I think my first thing with them was Unspeakable Oath, maybe number 10 and I don't know, 94, 93, 95, something like that. And I would write freelance reviews for them. And so at some point in the later 90s, John emailed me and asked if I could basically turn around a quick read through, give them feedback, make sure there's no glaring holes in the Delta Green manuscript before it was being published. So that's why I get the special thanks there. And it was kind of funny. They spelled my name correctly in every other publication for a number of years. So I think the one that's in Delta Green is actually correct. They usually mangled my first name in one of the books somewhere along the way. But yeah, so really Pagan kind of started my professional RPG career, and then at the same time I was working with them, I founded a game publishing company in Lawrence called Van Horizon Productions. and we had that going from about 95 to 99 or so, which had nothing to do with anything as cool as Delta Green or Cthulhu. But we did do a fun, again, kind of 90s zeitgeist millennial type game. But we designed a really fun diceless system for a game called Heaven and Earth. So that was fun. But anyway, that's a long, circuitous answer to me being involved with Pagan. But yeah, they're great guys.
No. That's great. That's great. Yeah, I've got to tell you that there was a brief period, and God knows it might come again. You know, when I was winnowing down the gaming bookshelf, it was not quite as prodigious as what's over your right shoulder there, and it looks like wrapping around the wall behind you. But I could not let Delta Green go, though. I just, that is one of the coolest damn RPG books in the world. If you don't have a copy, get it. Get a digital copy. Just track it down. I think like the first ones that came out in the 90s are pretty pricey, but I think they've gone through enough reprint cycles that you can lay your hands on.
Well, they've got them available, I think, on pod editions now through drive-through or whatever. And then I just saw a note from John that they're talking about doing a maybe it was Shane, a 25th anniversary edition through Kickstarter.
Oh, that is interesting news for those of us who also enjoy the occasional horror game. So I'm dying to know. Did they also kick you a free copy? Did you get a free copy for that?
Yeah, I think Pagan was pretty standard with the ways they did stuff. So like in the 90s, you know, if you worked on a book, you'd usually get between like two to six copies of a book or something like that. Whether you were a play tester, an editor, or something like that. So yeah, I had I'm sure at least a one gratis copy for it. Yeah.
Nice. I oh how times have changed now.
Yeah.
Frog God was very good to me with Lost Crypt, but I got this many copies of Elemental Moon from the folks over at Necromancer, which, I mean, to be honest, I wrote under a pen name, so maybe they just couldn't find me. But anyway, no, that's awesome. So you worked on Unspeakable Oath also. Did you, what was it, more editorial stuff or more editing stuff, or was it articles and
No, I didn't really write Cthulhu game material. I was suitably impressed with all the work the Pagan guys were doing that I certainly didn't at the time feel capable of throwing my pen into the mix. But I wrote freelance game reviews. Mm-hmm. So I did reviews of games like Cult, Nephilim, In Nomine, stuff like that. And then some Cthulhu related reviews here and there too, for books coming out from Chaosium. And then I did play testing for them. So I play tested the one of my favorite scenarios they ran at CoolCon, and then I play tested it again later before it was published in TUO eventually, in media res. That one and Grace Under Pressure, probably my two favorite convention scenarios I've ever played at a con. And then Jeff Barber kind of did a cool follow-up for Blue Planet to Grace Under Pressure, a similar type of scenario with some interesting twists that he did for the initial launch of that game too. So I'm hoping they're going to actually redo Grace Under Pressure for Delta Green, which would be cool. I think that's a great introductory scenario for Cthulhu and potentially for Delta Green. Yeah,
very much. So.
But yeah, mostly I did review writing with them and then playtest stuff. So I also playtested the some of the material in Golden Dawn, and then I did similar kinds of pre-publication critique read-throughs, things like that for some of their books.
Now, just to let you know, folks, this is a guy that, like, when I started asking him to come on the live stream, was like, I don't know, man. You know, I don't know if I've done any. You know, what will I talk about? Good Lord. I mean, you have worked with arguably the best publishing company outside of TSR at their peak when it comes to well, indirectly, because obviously Chaosium and Pagan are, you know, two branches off the same tree in terms of source, but different companies altogether. But that brings me to another question. Did you guys, like, during your time in there, did you interface directly with the guys over at Chaosium?
Oh, yeah. I met Greg Stafford at a Gamma trade show I guess probably in the mid 90s, maybe. And then I would review some of their books, you know, in the Unspeakable Oath from time to time, like Nephilim. You know, the U.S. edition of that was published by Chaosium.
Right.
So yeah, I knew those guys. They're great.
Okay.
I was very happy to see, you know, sort of the company get reorganized, and Rick Meintz, I think, is a good guy to be helming the company now these days.
Great, wonderful. Ever any correspondence, interaction with Sandy Peterson over there?
Not a lot, no. I met him a few times at the North Texas convention because he came, I don't know, maybe it was like 4 or 5 years ago or so. And he apparently had some guys over to his house for dinner and ran some Cthulhu and stuff there, which would have been great, but I didn't know that was happening at the time. But he was there doing some demos and prep right around the time, maybe the year before, year or two before that he did Cthulhu Wars. I think that was the name of his game.
Right on.
If I remember right. Yeah.
I think that was it.
I got him to sign a few of my books and box sets and stuff. But I think he and Larry Detillier are the only guys from Chaosium I've had sign any of my work. I don't think I've ever had Greg sign anything, unfortunately.
Right on. And let me just a quick bump. I mean, you know, I'm not sponsored by Chaosium. You know, I'm not sponsored by anybody. I mean, I'm so broke I can't even pay attention, folks. Don't ever worry about me trying to slip a commercial in on y'all. But if you've never played Call of Cthulhu, do yourself a favor. Go get any edition of Call of Cthulhu. Pick it up and play it. You'll have a hell of a good time. Whether you set it in modern times with something excellent like Delta Green, or you just stick to the 1920s, you know, nameless horrors lurking in your backyard in Connecticut level of stuff, you absolutely positively want to play Call of Cthulhu at least once in your life.
Yeah.
So
Call of Cthulhu is hands down my second most favorite RPG.
Sorry. I mean to keep trying to step on you. What is your favorite edition of Call of Cthulhu? And that's kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing because, you know, BRP, it's all the same.
Yeah, exactly. I like the GW 3rd edition hardcover that they did in the late 80s. because it's kind of a nice all-in-one package, assuming the pages don't fall out of it. And then I think the one that we were mostly playing was one of the 5th edition versions throughout the 90s. So I know that Pagan did their like 5.5 edition across several issues, The Unspeakable Oath, and I had kind of incorporated several of their variant suggestions and ideas into the games I was running and testing with. So yeah, that 5e is probably the one that I use the most, but they're all everything before from 6th edition earlier is all basically largely cross-compatible, and I'm not familiar enough with the new version, the 7th edition Cthulhu, to know what changed, to know whether it was really significant or not.
Yeah, that was always one thing I could appreciate about Chaosium is they found a formula and they stuck with it, and it did work pretty well. I'm a 4th edition guy just because that's where I started playing. 4th edition is my favorite book and if you'd been there handling this, I bet it wouldn't have happened. But 4th edition has this sort of meta error in it. It's kind of funny to me because there's a typesetting error. I mean, it goes beyond just a mere typographical error and goes straight into typesetting, where there's the entry for Azathoth, and it goes over a couple of page columns, and then it stops in a strange place, and then another entry for some elder god, but far lesser than Azathoth, starts up, and then the last section of the Azathoth entry just kind of interrupts, and then it continues on after that, with, of course, the joke being Azathoth is so horrible and awesome, it has the ability to break out of its own book entry and invade others. So that's right. 4E is a good one, but they're all good. They're all
like
good.
The leprechauns breaking the 4th wall of the monster manual.
Exactly. or the rust monster eating its own eating its own outline. And that dovetails nicely. Oh, Paul Stormberg says hello.
Hey, Paul.
And Paul Bacleta says, Larry Totillo, I would have loved to have met him, and he'd probably have hated me for talking his ear off about Babylon 5.
I met, let's see, when did I meet him? I guess it was after Babylon 5, yeah. So, he is a very nice guy. He introduced me to I played Cosmic Encounter with him and Tadashi at Dundracon for the first time, and he also introduced me to the Grohe card game and to the wonderful card/board game Ink and Gold, which is a fun press your luck exploratory game, kind of Indiana Jones in miniature.
Cool. So. I have played none of those, unfortunately. I've led a very cloistered life of role playing games, unfortunately. But you did kind of you've touched on something there. Let's talk a little bit about D&D.
Sure.
I think we're all of a certain age and from a certain demo, so I think we can skip over the preamble of when did you first play Dungeons and Dragons, because you found it in a toy store, saw friends playing it, the end, right? But you yourself, you dived in, depending on how you want to say that, head first into the world of Greyhawk. If you guys Google looking for Greyhawk information, ignoring the copy-pasted over and over and over again fan wikis that you're going to find, that's literally just like stuff that has been out there for 20 years that people have put into web-based wikis, you're going to find Allan's information about World of Greyhawk. Greydog's Greyhawk is probably one of the most, well, I'll just say, when you're talking about AD&D, the most critical resources you can tap for Greyhawk. When did you start your obsession that has turned into such an invaluable resource?
Well, I was a kid, so it's kind of hard to pin down an exact year or anything. But I bought a copy of the Greyhawk Folio at a convention flea market in the early '80s, and it had, let's see, and then the first two Dragon magazines I had bought together were issues 58 and 63. Okay. And 63 has the article on the Bandit Kingdoms in it, among other things. So that really kind of started me between that stuff and then the references in the Dungeon Master's Guide pointing backward to info about Greyhawk and such. That really kind of pushed me toward trying to collect old back issues of Dragon and learn all I could about the setting, which was a lot harder to do in the days before the Dragon archive, unfortunately.
Yeah. And of course, it didn't help that for a while you had certain people driving the prices of back issues of Dragon up. Sorry, I had to take a little shot at Paul there. Go ahead. But yeah, I mean, Greyhawk, I don't know, it just caught my eye. I think the stuff in the Dungeon Master's Guide with the artifacts in particular, all the name references, Dairn's Instant Fortress and, Joidy's Mask and all that good stuff, definitely piqued my interest. And, starting to be able to kind of connect the dots between the information in the folio for the entry on the Wild Coast, talking about Mordenkainen and Bigby hailing from there along with Robilar, and connecting those names into the player's handbook. So it just kind of sucked me in. Yeah, I mean there's definitely, and for those of you, I know we've got a lot of people listening or watching on the stream right now whose first blush of anything AD&D is listening to and watching the streams. A lot of editions of D&D that have come after second, third and fourth and 3.5 have talked about like baked in settings. It's never stated, but the default of AD&D I've always felt was Greyhawk, just because Gary did that. He put so much stuff from his own Greyhawk campaign directly into D&D and later AD&D that the two are inseparable, which I guess for me, to kind of get my grumpy GM pants on, is why I find first edition AD&D Dragonlance and Forgotten Realms so jarring, because it's like, you're in some other campaign setting and talking about Bigby's hand spells. Well, who the hell is Bigby in Forgotten Realms, right? Who's Mordenkainen and Kara-Tur, and that brings me to an interesting point. Now your participation, you can't. Oh, I knew Paul was going to say that. The value of dragons used to be a currency amongst collectors. When the archive came out, it killed the value of all but the first 24 issues. Paul and I are like Loki and Beale in the Star Trek Let That Be Your Last Battlefield episode, going round and around for all eternity about collections and collectability. So I just had to take a little dig at him. But I'm sorry, Allan, to get back to you. The larger Greyhawk world, are you in advance the timeline embrace everybody's input about Greyhawk into your own view of the Greyhawk campaign setting? Because it's like you go to Cannon Fire or other resources and they talk about, well, after the Greyhawk Wars, or after when Orcus was killed, or after, the betrayal of Rary, and I'm like, myself, just speaking for myself, I'm over here like, that never happened. What are you talking about? What is your take on advancing the Greyhawk campaign timeline, and do you think, regardless of how we may feel about the rules, do you think Wizards would be better suited by continuing this, or just throwing a big knife blade switch and retconning it and saying it's 579 again? That's it. Start here with a 5e Greydog folio.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of treat Greyhawk on a per campaign basis. So if I want to run a game kind of focusing on the land of Black Ice, I'll definitely look at and consider using material from various editions for it. In terms of the timeline, I think it would just depend on what I wanted to do with the game and this, the setting. But I cherry pick stuff that I like from various places. So, Ivid, to Ye Undying, it was this scenario that was never published. Officially, they published some excerpts in Dragon magazine.
Mm-hmm.
But it had some really interesting locations in there that I really liked. And I liked some of the cool things he did with integrating the artifacts into the history of the Great Kingdom, and giving some of them actual locations and things in there. But I really hated the stuff that was really lame. So I would, just kind of ignore that and ignore the stuff I don't like. And I do that kind of every time I'm running a new game. I think probably by default, I usually start a game in 576, because that's sort of the baseline era that I'm most familiar with. And it leaves a lot more wide open, I think, in terms of where and how you want to build your campaign out over time. But if I was running a game and I felt I got really interested in, I don't know, something about Keoland politics or whatever, and something like that, or like the Turmoil Between Crowns era of the Great Kingdom or something like that, I would totally use material from the other editions and things. But in terms of, so I think, WotC would do best to allow people whatever freedom they wanted to continue doing how they want to run the game in whatever way makes them happy. And, in all likelihood, I assume they'll just keep advancing the timeline over time if they ever do anything for Greyhawk ever again. But, we can freely do whatever we want with the game at that point.
Sure. Sure.
They're not taking away my powers as the dungeon master.
Right. Yet. I'm sure they're working on some technology, those fiends. Which brings us to another kind of interesting point. As someone who is so keen on Greyhawk, and it, we talk about advancing timelines, and what happens in one campaign doesn't affect what happens in my campaign. When Greyhawk was tall in the saddle for 3rd edition, at least officially from WotC, they had their Living Greyhawk campaign, and what was happening in other people's campaigns could affect what was. I mean, you're free to ignore it.
Yeah.
You were absolutely free to say, yeah, look, I don't care what you guys are doing up in Seattle or in conventions across the country. The giants are still there. They haven't been fought yet. Nobody knows about Drow. The Circle of 8 hasn't been broken, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What Was that basically your take? Just like, that's nice, you guys have got a living campaign going.
Yeah, I mean, it didn't have a huge impact on me and the games I was playing or running at that time. You could order in living Greyhawk scenarios for use at your home group, and I did that for a little while, but the timing for them, they kind of still had sort of a convention-based expectation for you to sort of report back and say, okay, so you ordered 3 scenarios last month, send me the results for the scenarios, and then we'll get you, whatever scenarios you want for next month or something like that. And I was not that diligent about following up on things. So I think eventually they kind of cut me off for things. Because the scenario didn't end up necessarily coming up in the game or something like that. And I was not by any means running stuff super regularly or as part of a, convention circuit, living gameplay, that kind of thing. So,
right.
Yeah.
Well, let's go ahead.
But it was interesting. I thought it was neat to kind of see some of the things they did with the Living Greyhawk storyline. Some of them were really lame and stupid, and some of them were interesting and cool. And, just like any other module, you kind of had to cherry pick stuff that looked cool. But I remember Eric Mona had this really cool set of what was going to be a series of adventures called the Absolute Power series, which was focused on the Optiches from WG5, from Rob's Mordenkainen's Fantastic Adventure, the little triangle symbol things.
Right.
And I don't think Rob had actually called them Octiches. I think that's something that they wrote into either the Mar Castle dungeons or maybe these specific adventures in Living Greyhawk. But they were neat. They were really well done, and I enjoyed those. And there were several other sets of kind of series of adventures and things like that were very, very cool, that came out of the Living Greyhawk groups across various, regions. But yeah, I didn't. I was not a huge participant in Greyhawk in the end, basically.
Yeah. One other comment, and then I've got a question for you. It seems to me, and maybe this is a question also, but it seems to me if you sift through the wreckage of the very end of 3.5, that WotC, at least as expressed through Dragon and Dungeon magazines respectively, which of course are gone now, that they were very much interested in tapping, if not the rules, certainly not the rules, but the old school sources. They went to Gary for articles in Dungeon and Dragon magazine. Of course, we got an absolutely fantastic issue of Dungeon. I think it was the last issue of Dungeon, or maybe I could be wrong, but it had a sequel to Mordenkainen's Fantastic Adventure, which I mean, it was written by Rob Kuntz. It's inseparable, in my opinion, from the actual adventure, regardless of the rules. I mean, you can D3E crapify it with, an afternoon and some AD&D rule books on hand.
Yeah.
But it's weird because it's like, did you guys not realize all along that you had this resource that you could use, and now only at the end do you realize what you've been squandering with other stuff?
I think that's true, and I think largely WotC was completely ignorant of Gary, for the most part, and or not interested in Gary and Rob. And it was really because all that work was done under the Paizo licensing for Dragon that Eric Mona and the other guys had to focus on Greyhawk in those issues, with the Age of Worms adventures adventure path with more castle levels, with the Savage Tide and stuff like that, and then lots of other support for Greyhawk in there, because the Living Greyhawk Journal was sort of a Ares subsection in Dragon for quite some time in the 3E era too, after it had stopped being published independently as zines by the RPGA. So, but I think that's largely attributable to the folks at Paizo rather than Wizards. I think they didn't really know what they had, and if they did, they weren't that interested.
Yeah, I don't want to wade off into a larger discussion of game politics, because that just leads to me getting redder in the face and being unhappy. But yeah, I feel like, Wizards of the Coast gets a lot of credit for saving Dungeons and Dragons, but at the same time, what did they do with what they saved? Well, they took the name and they put it on Ars Magica. Okay, that's it. And before he went to Paizo, what's his name? Sean Reynolds got to stalk around calling himself Mordenkainen. So there's two things. But to talk more about living campaigns, but not official living campaigns. And maybe this is something, kind of a bit of a preview, a sneak preview, because as you know, on the show, we've been doing a How to Play First Edition AD&D series. We've been going through the Player's Handbook, best practices, and later next week, we're going to jump into the monumental but incredibly fun task of talking about, best practices for DMing AD&D. And of course, one of those, and this can be broadly put across all role-playing games, is campaign management. When you run a Greyhawk campaign, is your World of Greyhawk living? If you started a game tomorrow with Temple of Elemental Evil or Village of Hamlet, even skipping the temple itself, would that merge into other Greyhawk campaigns that you've run in the past? Will those people bump in to NPCs and folk and hear of the brave adventurers who fought the slave lords back years ago, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I definitely do that a lot, in particular in my Castle Greyhawk levels that I've been running at GaryCon in North Texas and various other conventions for the last, 10, 12 years, whatever it is. So that's sort of like a mini living campaign, in the sense that I'll somebody scrawls, Matt Finch scrawled some graffiti in one of the levels at North Texas in one of the first couple of years there, and that's still there. So
nice,
unless somebody erases it or adds to it or something like that.
There you go.
But I mean, it's I will definitely run sort of a campaigns that are contiguous, but then I'll also do campaigns that are like a one-shot campaign. So I haven't run my AD&D Thieves campaign yet. I want to. It's on my list. But that would be a group of characters who were all members of a Thieves Guild. And it could be in, Divers or Greyhawk or, somewhere else potentially. But it would probably be, somewhat standalone relative to other games and campaigns I've run. And if I was running that Land of Black Ice campaign, it would probably be, similarly set up that way. So, they can, just depends on what I guess the mood of the players and or the participants is. If some of the people were playing in some of the previous games and knew of it, bringing in some of that history is certainly fun, and a nice nod to the players and what they've done before. But it wouldn't. I don't think like Jay Scott, who runs the Lord Gosumba streaming channel for Greyhawk stuff, and he's coordinating all the virtual Greyhawk Con work.
Yeah.
Again for this fall. He's had a single contiguous campaign for 40 years or 43 years or something crazy like that. And that's just not the way that I've done my campaigns. They don't have a single thread that runs all the way back to the beginning of things. Campaigns start and stop, and sometimes they're sequels or related or in the same timeline setting, and sometimes they're not.
Right on. And I think it can be a lot of fun. I have 2 Greyhawk campaigns. One started ages and ages and ages ago and ran up until, I would say it started around 2003, ended around 2010, maybe 2011, maybe as late as 2012. And then around 2014, I started and ran a game for a few years, and I tried to keep the two contiguous. And then there's the game. Maybe you've heard of it. I just got a couple of friends I get together with on Monday nights, and we do a little thing. But I think
I've heard of that one.
Yeah. And I thought, well, how the early 2000s campaign, the party got all the way up through the beginning of G3. And they literally said, okay, we're going to teleport back to this location and gather our thoughts. And we ended on the party finding out that there were certain powers pulling strings in Gorna who wanted them dead. And they said, okay, we're going to go meet at our favorite inn. And I said, okay, next week. And then that's where my campaign ended, unfortunately. And when I started a second group, my thinking was, I'll have these guys playing in that same campaign. But then I wanted to run the Giants series to completion.
Sure.
And the Monday night game, I want to run the Giants series to completion. So one does run into problems when you want to play certain classic modules over and over. You can either run a living campaign where you just don't do that. You're just constantly moving forward. But then your players, the further on you go and the more you add players and the more you continue this campaign, the more there's a sense of, yeah, the guys you DM'd 10 years ago did all the cool stuff already. The slavers have been put down. The giants have been suppressed. The Temple of Elemental Evil has been looted and closed for business. What else do we got? A spaceship in Jeff that's so dangerous that it'll be 5 years before we can even, consider checking that out, and then that's it. It's kind of like, when you play a sandbox game like Skyrim, there's a point at which you turn it on and you're looking around the map and you've got all the map markers and there's no point in going anywhere because you've cleared all those things out. So while a living campaign can be fun, I think you can run into a danger of everybody before you has done all the cool things and it's just going to be homebrew stuff now. Just homebrew stuff of mine. So do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, you can definitely reset stuff. I think, Gary and Rob certainly reset levels of the castle dungeons when they were running them at times. In particular, I think when they were playtesting them, Gary would run for Rob or vice versa, and then they'd reset it for the rest of the crew and presumably do a little tweaking and stuff at that point. But I mean, if you want to run certain awesome, cool modules, then you run the awesome, cool modules. You change the names, you could move them around to different locations. You can, change some of the flavor and things for them potentially. Yeah, I think you want to run the good ones, you just run them.
Well, I'm trying to do that on Monday night, but somebody keeps complaining about them. We're not high enough level. You'll kill us all. Yeah, well. We have a question, actually. Chris Kane asks, I'm still trying to incorporate Greyhawk lore into my games, but so far my players don't seem to care. Any suggestions? I currently have them exploring Castle Greyhawk. I'm going to let you field that one, Alan. That's.
Well, I think, if there's, the things that motivate adventurers are loot, and more loot, whether it's magic or treasure in monetary or whatever form, or information that they need, whether that's a command word or the location of a dungeon or somewhere where they need to go to do something or stuff like that. So if you have the players, I think, hungry enough, you can turn anything into lore that's going to whet their appetite if it looks tasty enough to them. So yeah. In the castle, you could let them know that give them a treasure map, and show that they have to go down 3 levels that they've never been through before, following the route on the map to get to, the troll's room. And in the troll's room is where, the Sword of Cass lies, or whatever it is that you're, needing to hook them with.
Alan's just like, third level artifact level magic item. Sure, why not? I think you breadcrumb that stuff. You literally, your players don't care about the lore. Make them care. The introduction, the breadcrumb trail for one of the most iconic Greyhawk locations, and one of the best AD&D modules ever not written by Gary Gygax, is of course White Plume Mountain, and it hits you right off the bat with Greyhawk lore, with that poem. Search ye far, search ye near, you'll find no trace of the three. And it's got a treasure map drawn by Errol Otis. Got an Errol Otis treasure map in it, for God's sake. It's got, and it points out all these things at Greyhawk, and it's stuff that your players have to engage with. You don't let them just say, oh, okay, we'll go to White Plume Mountain. Break out your campaign map and start counting hexes and tell them exactly where they're going to be going and exactly what they're going to be going through. And if they don't prepare for this location in Greyhawk and the potential ramifications, I mean, you haul the treasure stack out of White Plume Mountain and start trekking back to the city of Greyhawk, or wherever you call home base, Verbabonk, Stoink, whatever. You're going to be passing through a lot of counties, and you're going to have a lot, or countries rather, and you're going to have a lot of little local governments saying, hey, time to pay up. You're not just transporting 80,000 silver pieces through our nation without paying taxes. And as you grow your world organically around your players, it's inevitable that they will interact with it. They have to get to understand that if they want to just take a straight line as the crow flies shortcut back to Greyhawk and not around, they're going to be going through different countries. They're going to be meeting different people. They're going to be meeting people who may not want to just say, welcome to my inn, traveler. Would you like a flagon of ale? And that's then the ball bounces back to you, Dungeon Master, to look at those places. One of the worst things you can try to do as a DM is, as the players advance across the map, sit there at the table and roll the encounters. Ask them which route they're going to take. Roll all the encounters beforehand. Then they are traveling through an actual living world, and they will gain interest in it. So that's my 2 cents, and I've stepped on you twice now. Please go.
No, it's great. I think your point about that organic growth is really important. And I think one of the ways to help inject that into the game early on, and I know Chris is probably running a game for a bunch of his kids and friends of his kids. So they're not people who know Greyhawk, and they're not people who are necessarily maybe interested in homework to do research about Greyhawk, for example. But, one of the ways I think you can put that hook together for them that works well is to start it with the characters themselves. Sorry, my phone's doing weird things.
That's fine. We're all about weird things.
So magic users learn their spells from someone, right? Who is that guy or gal? That's their mentor. And, do they belong to a guild? Do the thieves belong to a local guild, or are they freelancing it? Are the druids in the party part of a circle of local druids related to Obed High or stuff like that? So, kind of grounding those characters in your environment is sort of a first step toward getting them interested in that lore. And that could be a two-way street. Maybe the higher level druid needs the lower level druid to deliver a message to a ranger in the Welkwood, and that starts a connection with those groups or something like that. And maybe the character later asks the mentor for some guidance to help identify a magic item or understand these weird runes they found or things like that. So I think there's ways to kind of ground the lore in stuff that's relevant to the characters at the beginning, and then kind of let it percolate and grow over time.
Exactly. And you hit the two key words. And trust me, guys, if you don't want to back up the live stream and listen to what Allan just said again, make a mental note and come back and listen to what he just said again. But the two key words there are over time. Don't try and force it. Don't try and make your players do all of their homework at once. You don't step into intermediate algebra or beginning algebra in middle school and the teacher's like, okay, we're going to talk about variables, but then at the end of the class, I'm going to be teaching you the quadratic equation, and you need to know it for tomorrow. Just let it grow. Now I'm gonna get some flack for this, and people are going to want to, pillory me in the public square. But one of the more interesting ideas that the edition that came between 3.5 and the current edition of D&D had was the idea of points of light, that you were a tiny little, and if I'm misusing this, then good, wherever you're starting out at is an island in a massive sea of darkness, and you slowly have to learn about it. And I think that's an actually fantastic way to approach a lore-heavy campaign, even if you're making up the lore literally 5 minutes in front of your characters. Remember, Gary was creating Greyhawk a week ahead of his players exploring it. They would hit a point and he'd say, there's vast iron doors blocking you from going any further. Oh, well, we'll have to come back with something powerful to try and cut those or magically open them or whatever. And then in the intervening day or days or week, he was frantically writing everything that was beyond that. It's because you didn't know the players were going to go that way. You have that option too. You don't have to write the Lord of the Rings if your characters are children in Hobbiton. Does that make sense? I hope it makes sense. But, and if characters bring cool and interesting ideas, use that as prompt. Use that as fuel. Listen to what your players are saying to each other, not necessarily to you, and let them be part of the lore of your game world, even if it is Greyhawk. For example, if a player wants to be a paladin of a god or goddess that normally doesn't have paladins, you can roll with that, right, Allan? I mean, that's crazy, but you can roll with that, right?
I've heard flexible DMs will let you get away with anything.
Flexible, not breakable. just remember that tree branch can snap right back on you.
Yeah.
So yeah, Allan, and we'll have a little bit of fun time here with this for those that are interested. Allan runs a paladin in our Monday night game, or as I like to call it, it has N+1 seats, where N is the current amount, and the +1 is if somebody wants to step up and join. But he came to me a few months ago. Well, a few months ago, has it been 2 years now?
It's been...
I'd be shocked if you didn't
been
have
a year and a quarter.
A year and a quarter.
Five quarters, yeah. Since May.
A year and 5
May
quarters. So Allan was told there would be no math. So he came to me with an idea, and this hopefully can go towards answering questions about lore and world building. And he said to me, Bill, I want to run a paladin. Okay, if you got the dice for it, go for it. It's the middle of the night in Australia right now, and the idea of running, of somebody just like taking 4d6 arranged to taste, is probably causing my co-host Kyle to like have night sweats. He's like tossing and turning in bed down in Australia. No, it has to be 3d6 in order. No. Ugh. Anyway, it's a running joke between Kyle and I of 3d6 down the line versus 4d6 drop lowest arranged to taste. But so Allan came to me and said, I want to run a paladin, and I want to run a paladin of Wee Joss. And Wee Joss is basically like if your goddess was Stevie Nicks, she's a witch, or a goddess of wizardry and of death. And I'm going to put you on the hot seat, Allan, because I want you to talk a little bit about that Greyhawk lore and how you've explored it as a player, if you want to. So,
sure.
Give us a little background on that. Why you chose a character that is so unusual. I mean, not just unusual in the sense of, it's tough to get a paladin, but I mean, you took a paladin of a goddess who is ostensibly, at best, lawful neutral.
Right. Yeah. So I've become pretty fascinated with Wee Joss as a figure in Greyhawk lore over the years. When I was living in California, and I was playing a 3.35 game, I think is what we were calling it. Mm-hmm. A game that was run by Mark Tizok Gonzalez, who is a phenomenal dungeon master also. And you might recognize his name from Greyhawk back in the day. But he went by MTG was his initials.
Okay.
But he had a really cool priestess of Wee Joss in the Wild Coast campaign that he was running, who we ended up interacting with several points over the course of the campaign. And then I had written a level in my Castle Greyhawk for a heretical sect of Wee Joss cultists, essentially. And I had a couple different flavors of that, where they were worshiping a male version of Weejas was the nature of their heresy, or there was like a regular group of Weejas people, but then an inner circle had been corrupted by Set, or things like that. So just various flavors of things. So I've been interested in her for a while as a figure, and I think I've just not played a paladin in a really long time. So it seemed like a neat way to explore that a little bit, and kind of see how you would, bring her to life in your games, which I've gotten more maybe than I expected out of that.
One might say that your paladin was dying to meet his goddess. Her goddess. Sorry, her goddess.
Exactly. So I think, there's from a Greyhawk lore point of view, she's a very interesting figure, in that, she has priestesses of all three lawful alignments that worship her. Mm-hmm. And she has these other weird associations. So she's the goddess of death, but she can command lawful undead, or actually she can command any undead, but she can summon lawful undead. She can summon lawful dragons, and then she has all these interesting little quirks and capabilities and things like that in the game. So like in the box set, or not, I guess it was in Len's article, he gave her clerics the ability to cast spells more quickly, which I never liked as a power for her. So I hacked that and gave it over to the God of Time, which made more sense to me. And then I gave her priests and priestesses different powers in my games. So they can take magic user weapons as proficient weapons. So they can wield daggers and darts in addition to staves and traditional cleric weapons. They can learn some magic spells and capabilities. So they can use magic user wands and items as they grow up in higher level as a cleric and things like that too. And then various other things. So I just like her as a figure. She's neat. And I thought playing a paladin of a figure that had this sort of broader view of the world than your traditional lawful good only god would be really interesting to explore and play with. So that's what made me decide to propose this as an idea to you, and to your credit, you ran with it, and we've had a lot of fun with it.
We have, and I think it creates a lot of interesting role play opportunities, and do keep your ears open to this, guys. This is not just Al and I engaging in mutual appreciation of one another. This is the kind of thing when you talk about Chris talking about engaging as players with Greyhawk lore. If a player is playing a paladin, don't simply let them be a paladin. They're a paragon of the frontward facing aspect of a god. They're not necessarily out there proselytizing like a cleric, but if they just say, yeah, I'm a paladin, talk to them. You're a paladin of whom? You're a paladin of Heronius? Well, here's some things you need to know. And I mean, Allan taking the very challenging approach of being a lawful good adherent to a goddess whose home plane is one of the less nasty hells is a heck of is a heck of a leap. And To be sure, Xanye, god damn it, Gary, 2 3-letter deities, both female. Couldn't you cut me a break? Wee Joss she's a goddess of death, but she doesn't want you dead. She's not Orcus. She's not like a female Orcus. In fact, I can imagine that, there's a lot of enmity between those two. But then Orcus is a demon.
As I'm sure we will be finding out.
I didn't say that.
Yes, you did.
You said that. You said that. But I, as the DM, of course, am obligated to take any ideas and desires that the party expresses and run with them. So thank you, Allan. But anyway, that is a fine way to help your players engage if you're running Greyhawk. If you're running anything, look at the gods and ask the players what they're doing. Is particularly if they're tapping divine magics. And I think Joshua just hit a homer in the comments over on YouTube. Your players might not be paying attention to the lore world. Doesn't mean that the world isn't paying attention to them. Now I don't want to have any discussion about real world stuff, but I always found this to be a very amusing comment, and I saw this I think I saw this when church marquees were a big thing. They had you stick the letters up there and it's lit up, and I saw one that says, attention atheists, just because you don't believe in God doesn't mean that he doesn't believe in you. And I think that's very salient to a good D&D game. Just because your players aren't paying attention to the gods doesn't mean the gods aren't paying attention to them. And that is a way you can shake characters up with lore in larger spheres beyond, you find a village. Well, what's this village called? Hamlet. Beyond engaging like that, there are beings, and your characters are special for a reason. You're not just a farmer who said, screw cutting apples out of trees with this thing. I'm gonna go hack at orcs. You're a little bit above the cut. Your players are a little bit above the cut, and so
and when they go to get healing after an adventure, to have poison neutralized, or to be raised from the dead, or buy holy water, or whatever, who is it that's doing all that?
Exactly. And I mean,
and it doesn't have to be heavy-handed. You can but it makes a difference if it's, St. Cuthbert providing these services versus Hieronymus versus Rao, or somebody else.
Yeah. And, when you start talking about the higher powered stuff, I mean, these are things that are directly given by a god. If you've got a lawful good cleric and there's a true neutral thief in the party, and the true neutral thief gets a lung full of phosgene gas from that chest that he failed his lockpick on, and the lawful good cleric steps up and he's like, no worries, I can raise him from the dead. Is Hieronymus or Foltus or Cuthbert, are they going to be entirely okay with that? It's just a spell, is it? And it's up to you, the DM, to kind of fill that in. And now the players at the table are starting to pay attention to...
Yeah, we don't want to go to the Foltus guy for healing. We want to go to the Cuthbert guy.
You want to go to the Cuthbert guy for healing, because the Foltus guy is going to hand us a chick tract.
Right.
And make us watch some videotapes of Jimmy Swaggart or something like that. But no, those are all things that you can use, that you can throw in, and you can spice up your game with, that get players engaged in the lore. And I mean, Joshua, he nailed it. The lore and the world are paying attention to your players, whether they're not paying attention to it or are, what have you. So yeah, I hope that answers that that question. You know, and Joshua brings up another good point. Placing a common thread throughout enemies may also generate interest, slowly revealing that a group of enemies in different locations is all the same members of this Scarlet Brotherhood can be bait, and it really can. You know, it's like, hey, these Brotherhood guys have great loot. Let's go looking for more. Why are all these where are all these assassins coming from? Thank you for the suggestion, Joshua. So what do we got? Do we have any more questions on deck? Anything anybody wants to ask or bring up? Any at all, you feel free to ask me. So what's a no shit there I was tabletop story, Allan, that you got? Any game, any area you gamed in, anybody you gamed with, what is your no shit there I was tabletop story for us?
Well, I had the pleasure of co-DMing Bottle City with Rob Kuntz at Gen Con in 2004 or 2007. I think it was 7. I think it was 7. Okay. That was a lot of fun. It's kind of seeing how it's always neat. I played in a lot of his games, but it's sort of neat to kind of see a little bit of the dynamic of what it might have been like when he and Gary were DMing together on things, and sort of how he would divide up tasks and, quick, go generate 3 summoned creatures this god just created to bash on the characters with in Bottle City, or, whatever. Things like that. So that was kind of fun. I don't know if that's what you're talking about, though, for that kind of moment or not. But
well, just something ridiculous, like, I don't know, just something ridiculous that may have happened at the table, like, you cakewalked some nasty area of Castle Greyhawk that you were exploring at Gary's table or something like that. Because I know you got to play you got to play some D&D with Gary, didn't you? Or did you? I'm asking.
Rob. Actually, with Gary. D&D. I played with a lot, and I think I actually played in a game with gang or two in the early 80s. But because I recognized Gary's picture years later from and he's got that picture where he's holding the skull on the insert. Yeah. And I was like, I know him. Where do I know him from?
God. So we had a little bit of breakup. You went robot on us, so I'm not going to ask you to repeat everything you said for like that 30-second gap. But were you saying that you had or had not played D&D with Gary?
No, I haven't played D&D with Gary. The closest I came to that was playing Gangbusters at a convention in the early 80s. That I remember him being there.
Okay, too, that catches us up to the pre-network issue. Bo Ganora has a question for you. Other than the Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master's Guide, and Monster Manual, what books should a first-time player be reading?
Ooh. In terms of like Greyhawky things, or like actually running AD&D? Because that's a little bit of a different, perhaps, slant.
All right, Bo, ball's back in your court. We'll see how that bounces back. But Paul Bacleta says, in relation to your previous guest, Gabber Lux, Allan's company Black Blade has most of his work in stock to order stateside. Get that sweet Helvetica box set. Yes, definitely.
Yeah, and I've got it right here because Gabor's work is awesome.
Yes, it is. That is the second most beautiful thing that he showed us. That one that is like in Hungarian, that it's like handmade RPG was just beautiful. But yeah, Helvetica is definitely one you should check out. So yeah, while we're waiting for Bo to clarify there, tell us a little bit about Black Blade.
So let's see. So Black Blade was founded by John Hirschberger and myself in 2009. So we're 11 years old now. 12, whatever. And we've been coming to North Texas conventions and to GaryCon since their inception. And we were one of the inaugural vendors at both conventions. We publish Ostrich. So we've been having Ostrich has been doing very nicely lately. So this is the new edition of Ostrich that's available. And when I say new edition, it's just a new printing. It's still the same, high quality edition itself that we've had over the years. Ostrich, I think, is sort of experiencing a little bit of a renaissance based on our sales 3 years. And we probably had only printed it maybe 2 or 3 times before that. So it's nice to see, Ostrich getting some more love as a game platform. I think there's a lot of people who are curious about AD&D these days. There's been a lot of folks in areas that I've not historically been as kind of plugged into who are interested in Ostrich and in AD&D. You mentioned in a sidebar chat the other day about how, the AD&D group on Reddit about some of the stuff you were looking at for Ouija stuff there. And to me, it seems like there's quite a bit of interest around AD&D in Reddit as well as on Twitter and MeWe and other places too. So that's neat. So Black Blade, we just took delivery of the new printing of Ostrich, which is great. And we were at North Texas this year in person back in June. And we had, Gabor's work there. We had Trent Smith's Heroic Legendarium book, which was made its debut there at the con.
Nice.
Along with a number of other folks who are friends who publish material that we carry at the booth.
Great.
We try to get the old school goodness out there for folks and make it available.
Indeed. And if you don't want to pick up AD&D PDFs, or if you want something that you can supplement your AD&D PDFs with, Ostrich all the way, baby. Although I will warn you, it was written by some real scoundrels. So just fairly warned be ye, says I. Watch out for those guys with the small lettering in the credits, because they're the worst type of riffraff. I have a note here from Ty Beard regarding Ostrich. Put monks in, you bastards. I don't know what that's about. But no, I'm friends with Ty, and Ty loves AD&D, and he said, I'm not going to try to do an impression of Ty Beard. He might sue me. But he is an enormous fan of the monk, and said, Ostrich is almost perfect. It is almost perfect, but for one glaring error. It does not have the monk.
Or bard.
Or the bard. Which is egregious enough to me. You're talking about my second favorite character class right there.
Yeah.
So a question from Cam. Yeah, watch out for guys named Bill in role-playing games. They're bad news. Cam says, what is current edition of Osric? Second?
Yeah. It's like the edition is still technically, I think, the 2.2 edition. There and the errata that's incorporated into it is current through the last layout revision that Jim Kramer had done before he died, which was back in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
So there's actually a new set of small refinements that are being caught as Steve EOTB goes through the Osric rules and has been building them for Fantasy Grounds. Mm-hmm. And I think that's out. Not out. It'll be out soon. And so there's some other minor things that have kind of been come up recently that are in there that have been noticed. That'll get it. The whole process is finished, and we can get it vetted by all the little people with tiny print names to make sure it qualifies.
Right on. I was talking to Steve. Those of you who watch the little short videos that I do, I mentioned I'm working on just little widgets, just little apps for the Windows desktop that can simplify dungeon mastering. And I wrote one in BASIC because that's the only programming language I know. And my brain is too old to learn and grasp other ones. But I wrote one in BASIC that would calculate if you missed with a grenade-like missile, you'd run the program and you would type in oil, acid, holy water, and hit enter, and it would say how far the item went, and if it landed close enough, how much damage it did to what it splashed. And I presented this to my corporate clients, my corporate AD&D gaming clients for my business, and said, here's a little utility I wrote. I know you guys are all programmers. They're Amazon AWS guys. And it made them so angry that someone wrote something in BASIC language in the year of our Lord 2021, complete with line numbers, I might add, that they took it away from me, rewrote it in Python, and made it a script that now runs on our Monday night game. If you guys throw something in, right. You can do dot splash. But as a follow-up to that, I started writing one for gem valuation called Gem Bag. And I was lamenting to Steve. I told you that story, so I could tell you this one. I was lamenting to Steve that I was stymied on part of the code. And he said, oh, no, what I'm doing with Fantasy Grounds and Osric is it's fundamental. It'll do that. Give me a monster, any monster. And so I just said, okay, a beholder. And he was like, God damn it, Bill, not a copyright monster. I was like, I'm sorry.
You said any monster.
You said any monster, Steve. So, I don't think he was genuinely angry. I just think it was like, oh, God, no, not a copyrighted monster. So Bo got back to us. From a player's perspective, not a DM's, just general resources for new people, which I think was his question about what books a first-time player should be reading. So what can a first-time player be reading? I'm going to put in, and then Allan, absolutely, if you got something... the question is more for my guest anyway, so I should probably let you talk first. Get them on to some short stories, and they don't have to read all the volumes, but some short Fafhrd and Grey Mouser stories. Any of the stuff, like Three Hearts and Three Lions by Poul Anderson is a great introduction to many of the concepts Gary was bringing to the table when it came to paladins and rangers and alignment and a whole lot of other things. That can really help from the getting them up to speed on like what should my mindset be. Allan, what do you got?
Yeah, I think Chris Kane actually had this a little bit with his kids too, where they were, the vision of fantasy is a little different in sort of when you look at like, the Last Airbender, contemporary fantasy movies or, whatever. So that his kids didn't have that idea of sort of how things were, so quote unquote, supposed to work. And I think that, your suggestion about going back to the fiction is a great idea. You could, and I think short stories are a good way to go about that, along with like, a lot of those early stories like Three Hearts and Three Lions or Broken Sword, they're really novellas. They're not like, this thick and like sort of Game of Thrones or something like that. You can read them in a couple days. So it's not a huge investment. And then a bunch of them are potentially, depending on how old they are, available for free through Project Gutenberg. So if you have an e-reader, you can download them for free there, which is always great in addition to getting them from your library. But like, I think other things that would be a good way to sort of get an idea about how D&D is supposed to kind of go could include, your classic mythology stories, whether that's Greek or Norse. The Hobbit, of course, is phenomenal for that.
Sure.
More on the short story side, again, I think Thieves' World, the first few books to that were really good. A little bit more on the larcenous Lonkmar style side of things.
Yes.
But very, very inspirational. And then one of the other more recent books we published was through Blackblade was Tales of Peril, which is John Eric Holmes's stories all collected into one. So it's all of his D&D stories for his Boinger and Zareth characters.
Oh, I want a copy of that. Set one. I don't mean for free, obviously, but set one aside for me. I want to get that.
Well, it's. I think we're out of print on them at this point. I relocated a case of them before North Texas, and then
I said set one aside for me.
But we are planning to reprint it.
Good. Good.
So that's one of my projects over the summer is to go through and fix the other typos that I introduced into it when we were doing layout and editing and things.
Sure. So there you go, guys. I mean, that's there's no reason you can't throw some inspirational reading at your players. And just for the record, no, you don't have to read all of Appendix N.
Oh goodness, no.
And if you do,
I haven't read all of Appendix N.
please don't make a blog spot page crowing about how you've read all of Appendix N, and how you're the greatest thing since sliced bread since you read all of Appendix N. I'll tell you a freebie though you could hook your players on if they like. I don't even consider it high fantasy. I would consider it middle fantasy, not low fantasy, certainly, but and it's free. It's online. Lord Dunsany's King of Elfland's Daughter. That is great inspirational reading for DMing right there and for playing. You really get a more organic feel for how magic and magic items work. It's not just like, we found another +1 sword in this pile of gold pieces over here. All right, put it in a sheath and throw it in the bag of holding. No, go read King of Elfland's Daughter. It really is wonderful stuff. It's very picaresque. So do give that one a try also.
And then if they were looking for sort of guidance for players learning how to play, not just the inspiration about how the game's supposed to go from a fiction point of view, the information at the back of the player's handbook under successful adventuring is gold.
Yes.
Both as a dungeon master and as a player.
And we have been talking about that extensively in the how to play courses. I kind of call it broadly best practices, and I mean, yes, you should be keeping track of time. Yes, you should be avoiding unnecessary encounters. Yes, you should have hirelings. Yes, you should make sure your light sources are all secure when necessary, and on and on and on and on. The back of the player's handbook. And when I introduced this section, and I'll reiterate this now, and Allan, I bet you will back me up on this. The Dungeon Master's Guide is Gary Gygax sitting right down next to you and saying, here's how we're going to get these sons of bitches. The Player's Handbook is Gary saying, we're coming after you. Here's how to survive that. I mean, it really, really is, two sets of rules for surviving, your characters surviving in a D&D game. Rules are in the Player's Handbook. So do follow Allan's advice. Do read the back of the Player's Handbook. Have your players read the back of the Player's Handbook. And, that's just, it is absolutely gold. It is absolutely gold.
Yeah.
It is key, how to keep players alive 101. Have a plan, stick to the plan. Don't get tangled up in unnecessary encounters. And if you're going into a dungeon to do something, go do it. Don't be like a 13-year-old kid in the mall with $25 in his pocket. Boy, I'm dating myself. $25 in your pocket wouldn't get you an Orange Julius and a corn dog. But, if your plan is to go slay the Orc King's bodyguards and the Orc King and get the crown of thieves, do that. Don't say, well, let's go kill some kobolds first, then we'll go over here. Because you'll never get over there. At least not in that adventure.
I've got a dog freaking out back somewhere behind me. Let me go check on the dog, Bill. I'll be back in a sec.
Okay,
Sorry.
We'll be right here. That's fine. That's fine. These things happen. I've had to step away myself with canine concerns before. You guys know that, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's fine. They're in the crate. The cleaners are doing the floor.
Right on. Oh, Bo just destroyed me. He just ruined my day and said Orange Julius went out of business. Yeah, like I said, I'm dating myself terribly. You mean there's not an Orange Julius next to the Tom McCann? But it was right there.
McCann.
It was right there across the mall concourse from the Walden books the last time I was there.
Yeah.
Well, all right. I think we've pretty much solved all the problems. And we've certainly kept you a really, really long time, Allan, and absolutely appreciate you being here. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you'd like to talk about? Any future plans? What are your plans for the future in Black Blade, or doing anything with anybody else, or solo stuff, or what have you?
No major, future plans. Working on the edits for Tales of Peril, so I gotta get them done by the end of September. And then, still want to get some of my levels published someday. So plugging away on those. So,
right on.
But nothing terribly timeline specific I can share on that front, I guess. And then I don't know. Maybe I've had a lot of fun exploring your version of Castle Greyhawk. So that's been a lot of fun as a player to get to do. I don't get to play in Castle Greyhawk really with any regularity other than playing with you. Back when Rob would run his levels at conventions, I would get to play in his El Raja K levels or castle levels occasionally too. But it's been a treat, so I've definitely enjoyed it. Bill's version of Castle Greyhawk, for those of you who are not participants in his various games, is a very deadly and convoluted place filled with evil and loot and whimsy and chaos, and it is a good time, certainly.
Well, thank you very much for the for the kind words, Allan, and thank you very much for being here today. Absolutely fantastic to have you on. So you'll be back another time, right? We'll get you back.
Sure. Yeah, and I'll even have a headset working with real internet next time.
Hey, this worked okay. We just had one little audio compression crashy thing. So yeah, it worked out a lot better than I thought. This morning, Allan was like, "My internet's down. I can't," and I was like, "You will." So we got him up on the screen. We made it work. We absolutely made it work. And speaking of making things work, this is certainly, it's not like you don't have enough irons in the fire already, Allan, but we are sitting at 753 viewers of this live stream, subscribers. Oh. 753. Well, not 753 watching right now.
I love prime numbers.
That would be awesome. Oh, there you go. But when we reach 1,000, it's mini convention time, guys. I will run a mini convention at least one day, all kinds of tabletop RPGs, virtual, because this is not a convention space. I don't think anybody wants to fly across the country to sit in my house. But when we hit 1,000 subs, that will be our celebration. We will have a virtual convention to celebrate that. So remind your friends, your family, click subscribe, click the bell icon to get notifications. Give a thumbs up and comment on all the videos. It helps get them out there. It helps people who maybe they love AD&D or they loved AD&D. I've had more people come to me and say, "Oh man, I loved playing AD&D back in the days. I guess they don't do that anymore." And I'm like, the hell they don't. The hell they don't. We play AD&D with passion around these parts. So like, subscribe, click the bell for notifications, comment if you want. If you don't like the videos, you don't have to like them, but that's entirely up to you. But I want everybody to have an absolutely great day. Please stay safe out there. Be good to each other. Tomorrow we are back with how to AD&D. We're going to be talking about dual classing and multi-classing, and yeah, we'll have a good time. All right, peace, everybody. I love you all. Have a fantastic day, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye. We are out. Allan, that was